Hello, and welcome to Educational Triage, where we discuss issues in alternative education. This is a discussion about teaching, by teachers, for teachers, and others who are interested in the alternative education world. We hope you find today's episode relevant, engaging, and useful. And if you do, please subscribe. I'm Tony Hunt, and I'm here to help guide you with the help of my friends Christy and Philip. Oh my gosh, it's another time for us to be back together, and it's so good to see everybody. Well, we can't see you, can we? But I can see Philip. Hey,
Aloha.
Philip.
Hi.
And I can see Christy Goodell.
Hello.
And we are back with another riveting adventure into alternative education, but actually we're going to do something even a little bit better. Things are becoming a little bit more timely, especially with this topic, and it's about flipping the system. And we are going to talk about an essay, which is the introduction to the book Flip the System, Changing Education from the Ground Up, which is edited, and what we're talking about was written by Jelmer and Rene Kneyber. And it's, in light of everything that's going on right now, and in a sense with Indiana House Bill 1134, which just went through, and what are the ramifications of that. And it's going to be, I think this is going to be a really interesting talk because it's going to be confirmation for a lot of people. It's going to be something that we can discuss as far as what are we doing and how do we deal with what we have. So
Do you want to summarize the House bill just in case there's a listener out there who has no idea what just happened?
Well,
can you summarize it in like a little blurb?
Yeah, well, the funny thing is I just saw it maybe about an hour ago that it passed, and House Bill 1134. Let me see if I can bring it up here. There it is. House Bill 1134. Basically, from my understanding, what I saw is that it's an education bill passed through the Indiana House addressing what could be taught within the curriculum of the public school system. And opponents say the bill, now moving to the Indiana Senate, would prohibit the teaching of certain historical facts at all K through 12 levels. But I'm hearing a little bit more. And what I'm hearing is that what they're really doing is, here are basically what I'm hearing. How true they are, I'm not really sure. I have to do more digging on it, but they say that teachers have to submit their entire year lesson plans by June 30.
I know. Just let that sink in. A year's worth of lesson plans you got to turn in.
Right. By June 30th. And then they're going to have committees made up of 60% parents and 40% teachers to go over the lesson plans. And they will cherry pick, is my understanding. So, well, I understand part of it, and I understand both sides in some ways. And let's just talk about, because I also, in our discussion today, we can talk a little bit about the martyr teacher syndrome too, and whether or not that's really a valid thing, or if it's just that we're kind of, I don't know, fraught with so many things that we just kind of lose sight of what we're doing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
So with House Bill 1134, and I don't want to get all politicky with everything because, but I guess we kind of are.
Not to.
Yeah. Well, parents want to have more of a say in what's going on in their child's education. Mm-hmm. And that kind of makes sense because I, as a parent, would want to know what's going on in the schools because, my kids come home and I have an interest and I want to make sure that I want to make sure that that they're getting good education and that they're being taught well. Not that I don't trust the kids' teachers, because if I have them in that school, then, because I do have options.
Right.
But is it overreach on the parents' part? Or is it because the schools don't own the children? So, because they are acting as parentis in locus parentis, which means that they are acting as the parents. So if I send my kids to childcare, I kind of want to know what's going on at that childcare.
Right. Yeah, there's awareness.
Right.
Yes.
Right. So, but to ask a teacher to come up with one full year's worth of lesson plans it's counterproductive, because what it says is that everything is programmed, everything is formulaic, and it does not account for any blips, blurps, or any kind of extra directions that maybe we need to go to in order to better serve the students. So let's say that I'm going to teach both of you next year, and as we start teaching, and I have everything programmed down to the day, what I'm going to be teaching you, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
Even if I had time to do something that onerous within the small amount of time that I would have.
Yeah.
Which is, to be quite honest, it's absolutely ridiculous to ask for something like that. I think it's beyond the pale. But every day that I teach you, I need to be able to assess whether or not you're actually picking up on it. When I remember teaching a group of kids, and we were reading the Poe's House of Usher, and they could not understand the vocabulary in that story because it is archaic and really esoteric vocabulary. And so trying to get through it, we had to go through some different methods. I had somebody else come in and try to teach them. It took us over a week to get there. And so finally the kids actually understood it. And I think we did a really nice job of having the kids understand what they were doing. Unfortunately, this was a high school where everything was programmed. You were supposed to teach X, Y, and Z on X, Y, and Z days. You knew what day you were showing a movie. You knew what day you were giving. Everybody knew what days everybody was doing something because they wanted. Oh, yeah. And so they were a little angry with me because I kind of went off script, like a lot.
Yeah.
And so I was teaching James Joyce. I was doing a whole lot of stuff with my freshmen. And so I had one parent who was a televangelist who came after me. But and I asked him to read the story, and he realized it was fine. But
the whole process just is
right.
frustrating on so many levels. It just kind of seems like the people who are passing the bill don't quite understand how schools work and how building a master schedule works, and you don't hire. Like, how are you? Can I
offer a perspective?
Well, you don't know who your students are, right? So yes. I don't know if I have kids with modifications or ELL or IEPs on there, or kids who struggle with all these things, and then that one day half your class is sick and I need to adjust, or they didn't understand this concept, so I can't go to what's on my lesson plan because a bunch of them I just looked on my tests and they missed a big gap, right? And then the workload of trying to prepare a year while you're also teaching at the same time, whoo, that's just like my head spinning.
And Philip, what do you got to say?
Okay, I'm listening to everybody speak. I'm looking at all the debates. Essentially, I think the debate has been made up for us. And I think the debate was made up in the 80s. It started to evolve, George W. Bush with No Child Left Behind. And I think the cherry on top was the race to the top with Obama. It was testing. When testing became the end-all be-all, that put the focus on standards. Standards became accepted. people started to see that as a way to measure human beings. Human beings became commodities that could be measured. Performance became something that could be standardized and measured. Schools lost and gained funding, its lifeblood based upon standards that could be measured but based on testing. Inner city schools dried up. Private industry came in. Charter schools filled the void, and education focused on that testing thing. Teachers are professionals. We have master's degrees. We don't follow scripts. We can't be told by someone who is unqualified completely how to do our jobs. A committee of parents can be advisory, and it's really nice, but they can't tell us how to perform the duties of the teacher. They don't know what we do. They can't possibly do that. And then to say that they can and somehow politically soothe the creases in our society, it doesn't do it. That's what's happening. There's no creativity. We're going into the future where we need to expand our horizons. And what we're doing is clamping down on creative thought, not by saying that we have to have our lesson plans done a year ahead of time, but by saying we must teach to the test. And I said it 20 years ago and it was dismissed. And I'm saying it now, and we're so deep into the woods, we don't see the forest at all. We're teaching to the test, and all the rest of it seems to be just lost to the wayside. I really do think. We've lost all our creativity. We're not treated like professionals in a lot of different ways.
Right. You can't be creative if you've got everything planned down to the minute that doesn't adjust for any flexibility or creativity or pivoting into a discussion or, Socratic seminar, like any of those strategies.
Human beings are human beings. I need the flexibility to address an entire class of individuals, not a fifth grade unit. They don't move together. I don't create workers. I help human beings seek where they need to be. This is ridiculous. This whole thing.
Well, and I fully understand the transparency, which is why we've got syllabuses up there, right? Like, I mean, on Canvas, which is the system that we use right now to publish our, that's how kids can access so much of their stuff. Like all the stuff is out there. It's not like we're hiding. No, don't tell anyone what we're doing. But to assume, but you're right. Like, I can't think of other professions where people who aren't in that field can then dictate. Like, I would never ask.
Would you walk into an emergency room and go, "Hey, I don't like the way you're doing that, doctors.
Yeah,
you need some people who aren't even close to having medical degrees come in here and tell you how to do this." In fact, 60% of the people that are going to run this emergency department aren't even medically trained. 40% of you, but 60% of us are going to tell you how we want you to serve us medically, even though we know nothing about the profession. And 40% of us. 40% of that committee can be people made up of professionals who have degrees and have studied this and know how to do it. That makes no sense whatsoever. But it's a political thing.
The profession is, our profession is built on being able to be flexible and patient and individualize our and have that be able to not dissertation. I'm blanking on the word. Starts with the disseminate. Nope, that's not it. It'll come to me. Right. But like being able, I'm not treating everyone exactly the same, right? Like I've got, I know you need some repetition on this work, and I know that you are just going to independently work, and I'm going to challenge you.
Differentiation.
Thank you. Yes. Right. Yeah. And so this is assuming that's gone. Right. I'm going to teach everybody exactly the same at the same pace.
I'm going to quote my mentor again. Nothing is more unequal than the equal treatment of unequals. You can't just stamp the same thing on everyone.
I know. This is so frustrating.
Let me throw this out to you both. Mm-hmm. And that is, how much of this do you think comes from people being afraid, people not understanding, and people being afraid, because the media has really ginned up the conversation a great deal, and people are suffering for it. The media, I blame for the hype the hyper anxiety that we have right now
Mm-hmm.
with all the clickbait, with everything that's going on, because they're looking for things that they can really target people with, and they really get those conversations. How much of this are the media pushing narratives and then the parents demanding to know what's going on, but also their insecurities about what's really happening and their need to know? And how often are school boards actually just being transparent and just working with parents, or are they?
Well, two separate
Well,
questions.
and
The
I
first
guess,
thing is that
yeah, that's a
yes,
lot of it.
most of it is due to fear. Absolutely.
Yes.
Because there's a
Yes.
thing called the Kruger-Dunning effect. It's been used to explain why people can be so ignorant that they don't know they're ignorant of something. And it was kind of like, why are stupid people stupid? They're so stupid they don't know they're stupid. But it's more complicated than that. What it is there's an initial sort of way of learning something. And when you first learn it, your learning curve is like darn near vertical and you feel like a genius, like, wow, look what I've learned. And as you settle into it, then you start to get real quiet because you realize, oh boy, I'm really in for this and I'm learning a lot. And as you become a master, then you sort of ascend to a level of when you open your mouth, you kind of know so much that mere mortals don't understand you. Like you can't talk surgery at a party. It doesn't work that way, you know? And so
What?
you can talk with surgeons, but you can't talk with normal people about surgery. See what I'm saying? So everyone's kind of at the first curve of the Kruger-Dunning effect. They've learned a lot, but not enough to become expert. And so they kind of think they know something, but they don't know enough to become a master or an expert. And so they talk a lot, they sound like they know a lot, but they don't know enough to become very proficient at it. And I think there's a lot of people in media and on podcasts that think they know a lot. They say it. And to people that don't know a lot, they sound like they know a lot. And we're flooded with this initial blast of information that sounds credible. But if you really dig deep into it, like critical race theory, I've studied it. It's a book. I studied it 20 years ago, 25 years ago in college. It's boring. It's hyper focused. If you teach it to anybody below the grade of 12, you're going to put them to sleep. And no, it shouldn't be taught at that level. It's graduate level stuff. The point is, but anybody who wants to go hyper crazy on that at the initial introduction to it can say, critical race theory, it says everything is based on race and that we've really screwed our society over by looking by the race differential. And you go, well, yeah, initially, yeah, but if you look into it, it starts to explain things and then everything isn't all that it is. And then you can understand that. And so you can't say they're teaching critical race theory to fifth graders. That is absurd. Unless you don't know what you don't know what you're talking about. And everyone is stuck at the initial point where they're saying they're teaching this in schools and they're not. And that's
that comes back to the fear part. That's the fear that they don't know, right? I'm not quite sure what you're teaching, so I'm going to just kind of go on the offensive.
And then I'll explain it to them, and I'm kind of an expert in this, and I'm boring. Who wants to listen to me? It's like, oh, I'd rather listen to Tucker Carlson. He scares the hell out of me. Summers is just boring. It's like, thank you. I am boring because I know it. And critical race theory is boring. But
kind of taking a step back on so let's say, I'm going to print all my lesson plans for an entire year. I mean, the mass of that, the weight of that task is insane. But let's say, bink, I do that. And then a parent gets it. Is it just being transparent or are there expectations of if I am a parent, I really don't like what you're doing on May 5th through the 8th. So do they get to tell them that the kids aren't going to participate? Do they have to?
It's a little bit of overreach. It's just a wee bit of overreach. I mean, that's like asking a mother or a father or a parent, let's call it a parent, to give you the menus for the next year.
Right.
How the heck are they going to know? I mean, basically what you're going to be doing, but sometimes you recalibrate and you start doing something different. So you never really know.
Right.
And I part of this is politics. And part of this, because once again, why are politicians telling people what they should be doing in the classroom?
Right.
because they don't have any better idea than the little old lady living down the street from me who crochets and listens to, let's say, NPR, and then tells you everything that she believes is happening in the world, because they don't really have a broad view. And if you're only listening to one source and you're not listening to diametrically opposed forces so that you can actually formulate an opinion, you really don't have much of anything. And so I think parents are wary of schools. I think school boards have been a little dismissive of parents. This kind of goes back to the Supreme Court ruling of 1926 of Sisters of Oregon versus Pierce, where the Supreme Court declared that the state does not own the children. And it's because they were trying to force all students to go to public education.
Okay.
And they were trying to force out the parochial schools. So, and it was also a very racial kind of thing because it was backed by the Masons and the KKK on the referendum that passed. So, I mean, it's a very charged kind of thing. I understand that parents want to understand what's going on in the schools. I think that there's a better way to do it. I think that school boards need to be more open and less virtue signaling and less virtue smearing, as well as other people. And I believe that if there was a way for administration to actually communicate more openly with parents, so if there were parents that were worried about something, that maybe there was a committee where parent involvement could happen. And it would also involve the teachers, so they worked collectively together.
Which most school districts have. That either they call them site councils or it's your PSO. They have those pockets in not every school district.
It needs to be reinvented.
But to have a parent say,
but those are being eroded.
Yeah,
there's been an erosion of that, though.
But if the state's coming at teachers saying, hey, you need to list every single article, book, assignment for an entire year, and then we will review it as a committee, and then what happens? Do they tell you, hey, you can't teach this part, or you need to change this?
Or my son or daughter does not want to be part of that?
Right. So now we're it just is, it wasn't the intent of public education to just pick and choose what aligns with what I do or don't agree with, right? The whole point is to broaden people's knowledge base so that they can make informed decisions and be part of the community as, not an elder, but as an adult, right? I want you to be an informed citizen and be able to participate in careers and volunteer or be a good citizen, right?
Productive citizen.
But if I'm only teaching you stuff that only aligns with your belief and you don't have any awareness of anything outside your little bubble, then that's not what public education is. If you want to streamline exactly what you want them to learn, there are a lot of options for parents to choose.
Right.
To go and have it aligned with, which is totally fine, right? But public education, the foundation of it is that we take all and we embrace all and then we teach all. That's what it should be. Not this is my viewpoint and this isn't, so I won't teach this part. It just seems so counterintuitive. And I guess such with special ed, it's we just promote inclusivity and access, right? Free and public education. And this just sounds so not supportive of that, unfortunately.
Well, in the research that I've been doing too, in public education, 30% over the years has 30% of the population in public schools have been in special ed in one way or another, which is kind of an astounding number.
Say that again. So 30% of people who have participated in public education,
yes, of students have participated in special ed, which I find really interesting. I'm telling you that I read it somewhere while I was doing my research. I've had a very crazy 2 weeks. They've been absolutely packed, not only at work, but I come home to my contractors. And so, today I had a little war between my contractors and my plumber, and it was kind of fun.
Like the Sharks and the Jets, plumbing and contracting.
Well, no, and there was COVID involved. I mean, it was kind of crazy, and at the same time, I was trying to deal with some stuff on some other levels, and I had students lining up. It was just a lot. So
because we just started our new semester to our listeners, and that's always a crazy time of the school year.
So, but what this does, though, if you take a look at it, and this feeds right into what the main source of today's topic was.
What was that? Sorry.
So segue. I think we're going to make a quick segue, because I don't want to throw this over to the side and just talk about 1134, because I have a feeling that more things are going to be coming down the pike that are going to look like that. And I think that it is a reaction. It hasn't become law. So there's still time for adjustments.
Right.
But
if it's
things
making
can
its
happen
way
with
this
it.
far, right? That's a good litmus test, right? That's a good barometer of how people are feeling about education too. I mean, it's important to recognize what's driving this, even though myself as a teacher, I'm not really worried about that.
But here's okay. So
you were segueing back, and I'm getting us off again. Sorry, zippity zip.
Thank you. So basically, the neoliberal reforms that we have going on in education and in our world today, which is basically looking at the value of everything. And so a bill like this, in a sense, devalues the teacher. It makes the teacher, in a sense, an unwilling slave to the wants and needs of the political class, of the parents, and it has very little to do with the care and feeding of the education to the children, in a sense, and taking care of them. And I think that, I believe that the parents have their children's interests at heart, but they're also terrified. And I kind of get it, because there's so much that's happening right now. Nobody knows for sure what's happening. We have become so divided, and everything is so divisive. So, but so if we're looking, and here I'm going to throw this out. Not content with just the introduction of parent choice and voice, pitting school against each other as competitors, governments nudge schools further into privatization through the use of high-stakes accountability, looking for ways to calculate a teacher's added value. So how do teachers add value to your school? And because I believe that if a teacher cannot come up, let's just say that a teacher can't come up with a full year's plans, what's going to happen to them? I mean, what's really going to happen? So if you're going to ping teachers around like that, double their salary and their benefits.
You'll never do that.
I mean, seriously.
It'll never
you never
happen.
will.
It'll never
because
happen.
with inflation, teacher salaries have not increased at all. And people say, look how much they make. Hey, we're making the same amount with inflation as we did in 1977.
Oh, yeah.
So
there are systemic reasons teachers will never receive the pay they deserve, ever.
Well, they're government workers, too.
Yeah.
And government workers they're basically on a pay scale.
Well, yeah, and government workers have been under attack since the 80s, period. And it doesn't show any signs of being relieved.
Oh, I think government workers have been under attack for decades, not just since then.
Since about the 80s, yeah. I would say the election of Ronald Reagan and the Reagan Revolution ushered in the dismantling of the American government as we know it.
Right, but you're talking. But what you're talking about is the publication of A Nation at Risk.
Oh, well,
And
that,
that's
yeah,
when
the
people
teachers thing,
really
yeah.
started looking. Yeah.
Oh, well, teachers in particular
Yeah.
have been under attack since before the 80s, but the 80s put any kind of hope of putting any investment in our government to rest. That was when the John Birch Society and all those that had spent the 20th century trying to try to undo Roosevelt's New Deal finally won. And we've been on a downward slide ever since. And we're certain, the bridge tumbled to the ground when hours before President Biden came to Philadelphia or Pennsylvania, somewhere in Pennsylvania, before to announce some kind of infrastructure deal. A bridge just collapsed. It's like, oops, the greatest nation in the world,
Mm-hmm.
a bridge just collapses. And, remember the Selwood Bridge here
I
in
see.
Portland was a 2 out of 100. And people were just driving blithely over it. It won't fall now. Well, it's going to fall sometime,
Yeah.
and you might be
Not
on it.
today.
Yeah, there's like
Not
fine,
on
and
my
then we
watch.
voted it down. It stayed up for an extra 2 years because people wouldn't pay an extra $5 in Clackamas County to replace it. I will. Hey, I'll chip in $5 so I don't, like possibly fall into the river. But no, that's just people don't like government. So
No, they don't like government, and I think people want to feel as though they have some kind of say, some kind of voice, some kind of control.
Yes, the control part.
When people feel as though things are being foisted upon them, they're going to react.
yeah.
The problem is that teachers end up receiving the crux of it, and it says here the neoliberal shift in reform has led to the death of the teacher, the death of the very idea that the teacher has something to contribute, the very idea that the teacher has a meaningful voice in regard to their work, to what they want to achieve through their work, and by which means they achieve it. And although it is a common and oft-cited belief that the quality of a system is determined by the quality of its teachers, that particular belief is of no benefit to teachers. In the neoliberal perspective, the teacher is viewed as a trained monkey. And it is simply a question of finding the right stick to beat him with or the right brand of peanuts to make him do the desired dance in front of the audience. The teacher is no longer viewed as a professional, but as a laborer who simply has goals.
Yeah.
Absolutely
I mean, that's what
accurate.
that comes back to the driving force behind the bill, kind of, right? I'm gonna tell you what to teach because it's my child, so I'm gonna tell you how to do it, and you're gonna do it. You're just gonna teach what I want, not the stuff I don't want, and so therefore, it kind of goes back to that control part. And I mean, that's like so bare bones, right? But like that's kind of what you were saying, Tony. That's
and we're going to give you maybe depending on how much time teachers have left in their year to come up with an arbitrary date of June 30th before they're supposed to, before the end of the fiscal year.
Right.
Teachers, I don't know how other states go, but most of us are already lounging and basking and going through therapy from the past year.
Oh, I was going to say we're lounging? Yeah. What? Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, we're recovering.
But I believe that what this is saying is that we've become the whipping boy. We're what everybody goes to. If schools aren't performing properly, administration comes after us. And so it's the teachers. It's not the administration. It's teachers. It has nothing to do with the quality of child that we are presented with. And, by golly,
we have no choice in. We take them all, right? We don't have a choice. Right?
And you know what? We're able to find the wealth of something inside that child for the most part.
Because we are experts in our field and we are trained, like Philip said, like lots of training, right? We've got masters, years of experience to just be able to get in there. And, we are focused on building relationships so that we can figure out how they learn best and making those connections so that they can expand their minds so that they can embrace learning at whatever level they come in. But again, we're all going to learn the same thing at the same time.
What does one of our students do to the stock market? What's one of our students worth on the stock market? What does John Smith, what is his value worth as a commodity? Darn it. I mean, unless we send that kid to Stanford or Harvard or Cornell, or he plays football at Bama or U of O, what is that kid worth? Honestly, they pay high school football coaches lots of money if a bunch of those kids end up going to big time universities, or they bestow science departments and math departments with STEM funds like nobody's business. So those kids go to Stanford and MIT because they can measure that. But special ed teachers and alternative ed teachers who are just kidding kids across the finish line of graduation, they don't get any recognition because those kids can't be measured for their worth. And that's what the society wants to know is, what are you worth? What are you worth? Because if you're not worth anything in this moment, you're not worth anything at all. And when you become worth something, come back and tell me, because I don't want to talk to you till then. You're not you're work in progress. You're only worth something when you're worth something. And that's what gets me about school.
Compared to your peers, right? Like I'm going to
right, like your peers. Everyone values the student body president and the homecoming king and queen, and no one cares about the kid sitting in the back who's stewing up the next best idea that might even save us all, because they're just shy at the age of 15. They're not worth a darn thing to the politician. It's just a quirky kid. Who cares? I want to talk to the valedictorian. I want to talk to the smartest kid in the class. Now that guy's going somewhere. That little lady knows what she's doing. And that kid, they don't really do anything. I want to talk to long-term life investment. I want to help kids find out what they do and how they do it, so that when they turn 35, they start to flower and grow and they finally get it together. Not, like flower and go up like a firework at 18 and then fade into nothing at 25. I mean, that's the whole thing. It's everyone wants to know the worth of somebody. That's capitalistic society, and they're trying to do it to our children.
But with the neoliberal reforms, here's what's happening. We have a lot of the micromanaging.
Yeah.
We have, if you take a look, we have the erosion of site councils. We have erosion of what we used to have in our district were EBIS and RTI meetings. And those were meetings where teachers, counselors, and administrators would meet on an even playing field, and they would discuss and they would plan and they would work things out. And they would come up with ideas and they would they would build new programs. They would start new things. In our building, that's where credit recovery and high school completion came out of. We had a lot of other great ideas that came through there. That was shut down because we now have an administration that is so insecure and believes that they have to prove themselves. So a teacher's say is only granted when they are asked what their thoughts are. They are not given the same respect that they used to have. And so that's,
and I would say like across districts, right? Like we're seeing that across districts, right?
Yes.
Like that,
it's become,
Yeah. And just to let people know, like those acronyms, because we love our acronyms, right? So like RTI was a response to intervention. Hey, we're going to try something, and how to, usually it's for a kid that's struggling, a student that's struggling, right, Tony? Like they're not doing so great in this area.
Right.
How can we add, sprinkle some stuff on their education, see how they respond to the intervention. If they're doing great, stay the course. And if not, we pivot, right? And then EBIS
that's rigidity. If you don't have that everything becomes rigid. That's what I'm talking about. That's an inefficiency in the system. We can't afford to have that. Everyone should be the same thing. Who's succeeding and who's not succeeding.
Everything comes down to the budget.
Yeah.
It comes down to the budget. When I went in and I said, I put all these things together. I worked on all of this stuff, blah, 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 blah. And
you worked on blah, blah, blah. I love it.
I'd kind of like to be paid for it. I mean, I had an agreement and I'm told, why should I pay you for working and getting all these things done when teachers were working? They go home, they work from 6 a.m. until 6 p.m. And I don't pay them extra. Why should I pay you anything extra? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it's like, really? So that's all we are, is you put in extra work, you're dedicating, you're trying to create things, and you're no better than a teacher who just sits there and works on their books, et cetera, because you've already done all that, because you have this on top of all of that.
Right.
And they devalue you. And then they say, hey, you know what? We're a family. Okay, everybody, we are a family.
Let's come they start every email family. With team. Like, we're a team?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And then you find out that people have either been terminated or transferred, or basically they've been undermined, and their position has been changed, and they have not been notified that it's been changed. And so they are now out of the running for even applying for the position that they've held. So you have disloyalty coming because we're all interchangeable. And so that devalues everything. And so in terms, we are supposed to be judged by, in terms of our accountability for reaching measurable outcomes, which goes to the principal, which goes to the central office, which goes to the regional office, which goes to the state. And so we have all of these things. Now, looking at all of these things, we can say, okay, we are severely put upon. And for a lot of teachers, they feel overloaded. We talked about this. Why are teachers quitting?
It's a workload.
It's a huge workload, and the disrespect, and we're kind of getting into the underbelly of a lot of that and picking things out. Now, I had a very interesting conversation with somebody the other day. They came into my office, and it was really fascinating. And she was saying, but administrators, if you look at effective superintendents, they must have an MBA in finance, because they have to understand all of these other things that are going on, as well as their leadership qualities, et cetera. Well, that's fine to have all of that. And I understand that you need that.
Like
but there's budget, also something about...
Budget. Is that what you're kind of talking about?
The budget and whatever. But when the budget is everything and you throw the baby out with the bathwater, when you spend more money on administration than you do on teachers, when you have a teacher shortage and you're unwilling to hire more teachers, and yet you hire more administrators, what is going on? I mean, this is kind of like crazy world. I don't understand it. And they refuse to pay different people. They refuse to pay electricians. They refuse to pay the building maintenance people a good living wage, or even, figure out a way so that they can keep them, because they're leaving and they are just overworked and underappreciated.
Yeah.
And
the workload, and then you just don't, and then feeling devalued, right?
Exactly, because you just feel like you're a cog.
Yeah. If you have one part of your job, right, then hopefully the other parts are balancing it, right? Like, I mean, that's true for most careers. You aren't, not all, right? But this part is hard work, but I enjoy the field, or this part is hard, but I really enjoy working with my clients, or this part is hard, but I really enjoy my coworkers. But if we're being siloed, like I'm only in my classroom, I don't get to, I see my kids, but now my workload is so crazy, I can't build my relationships, and I don't have, the public or administration or district office or them don't trust my judgment, right? And then I have to justify it. It's just hard to feel motivated, right? And then where does that come through? That comes through in your classroom. And so then the kids are stressed, right? Like it just keeps
right. And it kind of feeds into that anxiety, maybe.
Right. Yeah. We talked about that a couple episodes. Yeah. Just a smidge. Right.
Well, so the teacher, I was listening to a podcast this week, and this person who was speaking, he's a teacher himself. And he said, the teacher martyr syndrome, though, teachers sometimes just need to be able to breathe, step back, use some of the SEL that we are teaching.
Yeah.
And think to themselves, what are my choices? What other choices do I have besides just quitting? and giving up.
Right.
And I kind of thought, well, it's really hard to say because you're not allowed to have a voice, because if you have a voice, then it's treated almost as blasphemy. And you have to go in and you have to go to the royal court and see whether or not you're worthy enough to be heard. So the interesting thing is, how then do we begin to take this kind of structure that we're dealing with, the structure where the parents are demanding that we suddenly be transparent and we give them everything that they want. Administration is sort of stuffing us into our little boxes and telling us we can come out when they say we can. How do we change that? Because in this introduction to the book of Flip the System,
yeah,
they say that what we need to do is, instead of staying at the bottom of the long list of authority with accountability, because the bottom rank is the teachers, then the school leaders are over them. Then we have the board of the school, and then we have the district, and then the government's up there. And the parents are somewhere in there as well. Well, what they would like to do is maintain the shape of the pyramid as it stands, where the government is that top little triangle, and then the district, the board, the school leaders, and the teachers. But how do we flip that so that teachers are at the top, but they're like the big strip?
Yeah, right.
So
yeah,
instead of
they're the driving force,
because they're driving everything, and then we have the school leaders supporting them, because that's the way it really should be, shouldn't it?
Right.
So, and then the school board should be supporting the school leaders. Where did we go wrong? Where did all of this change? Because to me, we had a very vibrant and incredible gig going, where we were working really well with admin. Admin was supportive. They were dealing with our programs. We had a lot happening. And all of a sudden, we got a new superintendent. My building ended up with a new principal and new vice principals. And, we have one vice principal who basically, kind of is a paper shuffler and keeps his head low and does very little. Very personable, very likable, but you can tell that they just want to keep their head low because they really like their job, because it pays really well. And so they just don't get their hands dirty with anything. And then we have other people, and I would have to say, out of the four, there might be one administrator who's actually doing something, and they're new this year, so they haven't really been that tainted. The problem is that since that change happened, the morale of the building has gone way down, and people are not happy.
It's just that one. It's just a horrible combo right now. We have a ton of, and again, not exclusive to our district, right? Coming out of COVID,
right.
And every day was new, and our workload changed every single second.
This was pre-COVID. This started happening pre-COVID.
Oh, absolutely.
And so
it's pre-COVID. It's actually what it is. I think it stems back to my original thesis, is that it's just the mindset of a top-down, profit margin-based, let's measure the value mindset. You have to have somebody in charge, and you have to have people below that work. And somehow we sort ourselves into that grouping, and the people in charge tend to be the administrators, and those administrators tend to somehow separate from the original task at hand, which is to educate children, and they lose sight of it, like the curriculum and curriculum and administration. The curriculum administrator who never taught a child, it's like, the guy never was in a classroom with a child and was responsible for handling all the stuff used to teach children with. makes no sense.
Right.
So that's just, I
Goes
must
back
be
to
in
the same
charge. I
thing of
studied
the
how to do it without the
yeah.
experience of doing the job. And so what happened, I believe, was that we just go into that mindset of I'm in charge here, regardless of whether or not I know how to be. And then the separation came, and we just take it for what it is.
It's
And
not
then they just said,
trusting
well,
the
we're the
experts.
administration. We need what we need, and we don't really care what anybody else needs. And then it just became the top heavy, bloated monstrosity that we've noticed. You're absolutely right. There's no respect for teachers whatsoever. And that's just an abomination because they are
Right.
really creative, and they're in charge of a schoolroom of kids. They really have to be the ones that are in charge. The administrators don't have
Yeah,
to
you
be there.
trust them,
Teachers
but
don't really
we're
need them. We've done it on our own
No.
anyway. All they do is hinder. If you look at it, I think if you look at it, most teachers would agree all administrators do, except for the building principals who aid us all, if they're good. If they don't, they just hinder. All they do is hinder us, period, for the most part.
Well, they don't know how to play on a team because they want to be
Right.
the star quarterback, and they want everybody else. Let's pretend that they are Xerxes in 300.
Ooh.
okay.
I don't know if either of you saw that.
Yes,
mean,
and
it's
that was
like
a
you
bad
can't.
Julie
If
choice.
you're just listening, you can't see the furrowed brow. Like
I've seen some piercings, but
Well,
that guy went excessive.
Well, a little bit. So he's being carried on this gigantic litter, and I mean, he is like this immense god,
Okay.
and everybody is sacrificing themselves for him,
Yeah.
and they're just being annihilated. Well, that's kind of how the principal believes that he should be treated, that we should annihilate ourselves, and that if we leave, big deal, we'll find somebody else to take your place. So there's nothing special about the talents or the creativity or any of the work that you do because it's always the same people who are those who lick the heels who they treasure. Our principal said he wanted change, and yet he has maintained the same people on the same track looking for change. And he's been told time and time again, if you want change, you need to shake things up. You can't do that because these people have been doing this for decades to formulate change, and yet nothing has ever changed. So,
and does that go back to like the triangle? Like, is our admin then being told from district, right? And so they are kind of feeling that trap thing because people at district who aren't in the trenches with us, and they're being told stuff, and they haven't been in the classroom in a long, long time, right? Like, is it that trickle down effect?
I would agree here's what I'm going to say. I'm going to agree to a point, but there also comes a point where they got to quit playing it safe. Because an administrator who sits there and says, this is the way you're going to do it, this is the way we want things to happen, is not a good administrator. A good administrator wants everybody in the building to be playing together, to work as a team, to do the best job that they can. That means that the coaching staff, which is, let's pretend that we'll do the sports analogy, the coaching team and the coaching staff, who are the administrators, should be working with the players. They should be in there. They should be going. They should have everybody working together to do something. We had a site council meeting, and there was an idea that was presented, and it would have involved the implementation of a whole lot of student clubs, a lot of teachers, and a lot of departments working together. The departments and the clubs all were gung-ho for this to happen. The principal decided and made the determination they weren't going to do it because it wasn't their idea, and they didn't want to have teachers leading that. It needed to be administratively led.
Case made.
I mean, and so they celebrate the teachers who make progress with certain groups. But when you're talking about, and this is going to be something that we're going to go into too, later on in another episode, is starting to work on what are some of the strategies to level the playing field so that we can work on systemic racism. Where is that? Because I believe that this addresses the fact that we do have systemic racism, and this creates more systemic racism because it treats more students and puts them into silos along with their teachers. It doesn't treat them fairly. It doesn't treat them right. It puts them into kind of a prison kind of situation. I've talked to a lot of students who say that they don't feel as though they're valued. They're valued by a lot of teachers, but administration, yeah. And this is coming from most of the mainstream kids. I'm not talking about my alternative kids. I'm talking about a lot of the mainstream kids. And I think that if we're going to close the achievement gap, we need to have interdepartmental working. We have to be able to bring in the community. We have to bring in the parents. We have to bring everybody working cohesively together, because all the data, all the quantitative and qualitative data that I have gone through over the past 20 years on working on this has proven that this is what needs to happen. And so there must be a way.
Part.
Yeah. And so if we were to flip the system, and I think we can come back to this because we're just barely scratching the surface on this, I believe. But here's my one question on House Bill 1134. How do you flip that? You know, how does somebody flip that around so that it becomes a constructive conversation with parents and the teachers? And how do you get that working rather than being reactive? How do you take that and create something that's worthwhile? Because out of a challenge and out of an obstacle, you can find absolutely wonderful, wonderful meaning.
Here's one of my first ideas.
You just have to find the right way.
I always wanted to teach a community course, like community college. Take a course with your kid. Somehow I could teach a high school course / community college credit course, and you could actually take the course with your child. And since I had, a Black studies sort of race and racism experience, and that was sort of new and novel for a while, people were like, whoa, you're offering a course, and that's not usual. There's maybe one at the community college and maybe one here, but maybe we could take this. And I thought I could teach it. And I wanted to do that in maybe early evening course. And, those students that wanted to take it, and mom and or dad could take it with you. And then they could learn how I teach and what's being taught at the high school, and kind of, hey, it's been a long time since you've been in high school. Want to take a course with your son and or daughter? That kind of thing. That's an idea.
Oh, yeah, because maybe you do a month where a teacher will teach a course and invites a lot of the parents in. Maybe let's say that Christy would teach a Monday night course in
doggies. Puppies.
In what? In puppies?
Dogs and puppies.
Yeah.
Little pups.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
A lot of people
and Philip would do one on. And let's say that Philip does one on Tuesday night. I would teach one on Wednesday night. Maybe we're going to do something like fun with Latin, and something that we really want to do. And the parents can come in with the kids, and we can do something like that. So there's an engagement. However, here's what I'm going to ask: how many of our students of color and their families will be able to be there?
Right.
We'll do one on the weekend too. I don't know.
Well, I mean,
we'll try.
This is one of the problems. This is something that a counselor from another alternative program came up with. Was I've got parents who are working 2 and 3 jobs. They don't have time for all that.
Yeah, I mean that's the if you're working all day or you go to school all day and then go to more school. I mean, that's the hard thing with students that struggle to engage and then say, hey, we're going to give you more time to engage. And the kids are kind of like, no. But I mean,
and sometimes the kids are working so that they can put food on the table.
Yeah. But I mean, I like the idea of thinking outside the box, right?
Right. Right. So let's say that I have to create my lesson plans for the next 10 months. And you're giving me 2 weeks to do it. Well, I could give you, I could tell you what I'm going to be doing because I've been doing that long enough. I mean, I could probably sketch out a semester. But you and I need to be able to have open-minded and an open-ended conversation. And maybe that means that we aren't able to come to a closure, but we can keep those channels of conversation open because I might actually learn something from you that I could actually use in that classroom. There might be more ideas. I can't be closed-minded myself.
Right.
So where is the opportunity in all of this that's happening? How can we use it? Does that kind of open that up a little bit differently, maybe?
I just like the idea that you proposed a couple moments ago about like what are ways to think outside the box, and I really appreciate that. And I do want to say, it may be just in my world, I have found administrators who are trying for myself in my program, right? But it kind of goes like, is my temperament because I kind of talk and squawk a bunch, and so therefore I am a little tenacious, but it takes a while. And if you're not that type of teacher, then are you not feeling like your voice is heard as much? So it's just, I think it's just hard on if what you're teaching kind of coincides with what the administrator's points of view are as well. Like if they align, then you might be quite successful at getting your needs met, right?
However, when you're teaching an alternative ed, and the admin thinks that they already understand everything that there is to know about alternative ed, and they also understand that there are things that they don't understand, that frightens them. Especially, I'm just going to say this: I do things, working on different committees and boards that are outside of the school district on a state level.
Yes,
and
that's true. You do a lot. You're busy.
I am. And I had no idea how threatened that my administration was by that. I had no idea. And I've been doing this for over 30 years.
Right.
So I kind of know my shiz.
Yeah.
And they've been doing it. They've been administrators for maybe 5 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, it goes back to you got to trust your professionals, right? You got to trust your.
And I speak to other teachers in my building, and they all just feel like they would love to leave, but they can't afford it. They would love to find something better to do.
And you're either vested in your district, or you just financially can't start over again, right? And it's just.
And there are people who are planning on retiring in 5 to 10 years who are now retiring because it's just not worth it. It's just not worth it anymore. They can't deal with it.
Well, and the whole package, right? The workload, the expectations, the not feeling valued, just
exactly
not feeling respected by whichever category,
exactly.
Right? And then just more is being asked of us. And I don't know if that goes back to the teacher martyrdom, but I mean, you can't negate how teachers are feeling, right? It's not like we're in an isolated thing. Like it is everywhere.
Right. It's everywhere.
So hard.
And I see this.
You can't get the teachers. The teachers aren't coming in. You can't hire them. They don't want to sub.
Mm-hmm. I know teachers that were let go, and then 2 days later they were told, "We need you back," and then they were told 2 weeks later, "We got to let you go," and then 2 days later, "We got to have you back." And because I was calling, I needed this person in order to help me, and somebody said, "Well, they don't work with us anymore," and I said, "Okay," because I had an email out to them and I hadn't heard. Then I find out that person was on vacation. And they called me from vacation. They said, "We finally have Wi-Fi." And guess what? When I got my Wi-Fi, I got a phone call that said that they needed me back. And this is like the 4th time this year.
Jeez.
So there's this weird yo-yo that's going on too. I mean, if you want to play ping pong, that's fine, but not with other people's lives, unless they agree to it. If it's consensual, then that's fine. But I don't believe that teachers should. I believe that teachers should not consent to being treated this way, and they should not be treated as little monkeys going after a sticker for a peanut. And they should not be allowed to be siloed. I believe that teachers need to start turning around and demanding respect from their administrators.
Because, and from the public, right? Like going back to this House bill, right?
Exactly. But how do you get that respect? And I think that maybe in our next episode, maybe that's something that we talk about. And that is investigate ways to flip the system. So we can take that. And I'm going to put in the notes, in the show notes, I'm going to put the link for people to actually read this essay so they can see what's going on with that. And I will also put in a link for House Bill 1134.
Yeah.
So, but thank you both. This has been terrific.
It has been, yeah.
Yeah. No.
Good discussions.
Okay. So thank you all. Thank you both for being here. And to all of our listeners, please subscribe, please rate us, please give us a comment, and we hope to see you again next week. And it's been a pleasure. Good night.